Hi, I'm Frau Fiber.
And I'm Faux Frau Lauren.
We're here to show you today how to make your own wonderful trapper's hat, just in time to keep the winter blues away. So we are sewing today with this Singer Fashion Mate 256. It has zigzag capabilities, but today we're just going to be using the straight stitch capabilities. For today's trapper's hat, we'll be using some old table linens, a remnant of a piece of denim that's kind of like in the railroad style, and an old wool sweater. So Faux Frau Lauren is working on the layout. And for the layout of the pattern, you want to figure out how you can do it to have the least amount of waste. As you can see here, we've got the patterns fitting nicely together. Now the next step is to trace those with the tailor's chalk. And you can either use the pattern weight or you can hold it with your hand to weight it down. And then trace with the color that's going to show up. Our patterns are made out of manila, so they're a little bit heavier weight and makes them easier to trace around. And you want to make sure to trace your markings as well, so like where the darts are going to go, where the flap of the cap is going to fit in, and where the ears are going to fit in. You also want to make sure that your pattern's not moving around while you're trying to trace it. And weighting the pattern down is so much more efficient than when you pin them down, which takes a lot of extra time. Super. Because we're using scraps, we kind of have to piece our stacking together. So stacking is what you do with your layers of fabric when you're cutting a lining, an exterior fabric, and an interfacing. You stack them all together at one time. Make sure it's traced and everything's lined up. And then when you cut, you're cutting 3 layers at one time. So right now, Faux Frau Lauren is stacking what's going to be our lining fabric, which is these different tablecloth pieces. Okay, so Lauren has completed the stacking process. You see the outer fabric, the lining, and then the padding that we're going to use to interface the hat to provide extra warmth. And now she's ready to start cutting. So she's going to use the brick to weight the fabric down, and then go ahead and cut each piece out. Following along the yellow tailor chalk line. So we have all of our pieces cut out, and we've organized them by fashion fabric with interfacing piece. and then the lining pieces. And the first step that you're going to do is to baste your interfacing, in this case the wool sweater, on a large stitch to the fashion fabric piece, the outer piece. Sometimes the interfacing stretches at a different rate, as it did here. You just want to make sure that you ease that in. Because we've got two things going here, a woven fabric and a knit fabric. So you just have to be mindful that things are stretching into place. So you do that same process on all the pieces, the ear flaps, the cap piece, and the flat piece. Okay, so now we're ready to begin sewing the hat together. We're going to start with the ear flaps. You're going to sew the center back seam at 1/2 inch on the fashion fabric and the lining. And you don't have to backstitch, and you can just add your lining piece right into that's Lauren's parking alarm telling her she needs to go change her parking ticket. So we'll be right. So after you have sewn your 1/2 inch, you're going to press that side seam or the back seam flat. And I'm using steam in my iron because all of these are natural fibers. Okay. Next step will be sewing your lining to your fashion fabric. So I've pinned the two pieces together in a few spots and also added some black loops to be able to put some buttons on your cap to hold your ear flaps up. And now it's going to get sewn at 1/2 inch all the way around. Take your time around the curve. Make sure you pull your pins out as you sew so you don't have to over them. Lauren's using that technique to kind of get over the thick parts. You want to take your time over that so you don't break the needle. Okay, once you've completed your sewing, you're going to notch in the curved areas of the ear flap so that you have a nice curved shape around your ears. And you just notch right up to the seam that you sewed, about every 1/2 inch in the curved part.
And make sure you're using really sharp shears because these ones are not cutting it.
So we'll have to grab some sharper scissors. We'll try that again with the sharp shears. And trim any excess away also. So you're going to do that around all your curved parts. And then turn the ear flaps right side out. So we flipped the ear flaps right side out. So you can see there's the cherry and the stripe. Gave it a press after we did our notching. And now Lauren's going to do a top stitch at about 1/4 inch all the way around. Just gives a nice finish. And she's stitching it at about set on a 3. On this machine it's a 12, but it would be like kind of a 3. Alright, so then you're going to repeat the same steps with the front flap of the hat, which is like the brim, or yeah, I call it a flap. So you're going to stitch around, notch, flip it right side out, and top stitch. Okay, we're going to be sewing the center of the cap. So right sides together along that long side at a 1/2 inch. And then you're going to stitch it open, your seam open, following creating a top stitching. But we'll start with this 1/2 inch seam first. See some of the bubbles we got there. Just for some efficiency with our home sewing, we're going to do the lining next. So then you don't have to cut anything. Just do your lining right after. A little bit of a sweatshop technique that you can use in your own home. Okay, then you're going to press those seams open and we'll come back to the machine for the top stitching. Okay, so now Lauren is going to do the top stitching from the Basting fabric side. So she's lining up the left side of the foot with the left side, with the seam, the center of the seam. With that nice contrasting thread. And then she's going to go down the other side. So there's
Also helps to hold the seam allowance flat.
Yep. So next step is on the side panels of the cap. You're gonna put a dart that starts at the bottom and goes all the way across to the top part of the cap. It's about a half an inch dart, half an inch to nothing. And once again, Lauren is using a little bit of the piecework technique. So you don't have to use as much thread, and you don't have to cut so many times and stop and start so many times. And the lining piece gets the same thing. And then we're going to press those and do top stitching on the fashion fabric. So now Lauren's sewing the fashion fabric part of the cap. So it's like the side cap to the center cap. It's a little bit thicker, so you kind of have to coax it through the machine a little bit more. Okay, then you do the other side and then press your seams open. So the next step is to sew the cap together with you had that center panel that you made, and now you're sewing in your side panels, and you're gonna have to ease the curves across the top, kind of like sewing in a cap of a sleeve if you've ever done that. And it's gonna be a ½ inch seam allowance. So when you sew it, you want to sew it with the curved part on the top. That way you can control how the ease is shifting in. And sometimes I'll like use a pair of scissors to like push the ease in when it gets to hard spots. Or if it's partially because I don't have very long fingernails, so if you have long fingernails, then you can use those instead. But take your time and go slow, and the first time you do this, it might be kind of a challenge. That's also why I'm starting with the lining. That way if I mess up on something that's going to be on the inside, not the fashion fabric outside. Try and get over Lauren's shoulder here a little bit so we can see what's going on. Okay, so the cap was finished, and then we pinned in the ear flaps and the front brim flap. And now we're gonna do a basting stitch to hold it all in place before we sew the lining into it. Before Lauren sews the lining into it. So in a basting stitch is like the full stitch length, sometimes a 5 on newer machines, but you don't want it to be a tight stitch because you have to take it out. And it's just meant to hold it in place. If you're a more advanced sewer, you don't necessarily have to do the basting stitch. You can just sew the lining in with it pinned. But this is a helpful way of doing it. Also gives you a stitch line for when you sew your lining in. You can just follow along on that 1/2-inch basting stitch. I wonder if the teeth dropped on that. Okay, then the next step is to pin the lining into or onto the fashion fabric. So here's the lining of the hat sitting on the table, and then the other part of the hat, the fashion fabric part of the hat, is just going to get put inside of it. You're going to line up all your seam allowances. So center front, side front. Make sure everything's lined up and put some pins in there, and then you're gonna sew it all the way around closed, but leaving like a 3-inch opening. Okay, so now Lauren is going to sew everything together so it's like a hat. Now, this is a hat for a large head, so you might need to adjust it as needed. You could do that by just taking deeper seam allowances. Like if you make it 3/4 of an inch seam allowance, it'll make it a lot smaller hat. Or if you take deeper darts, or maybe just a deeper like center. But you might want to measure your head before you start sewing this and make sure that it's going to work for your head size. This machine is also struggling a little bit with the thickness, so be mindful of your fabric choices and the kind of machine that you have. If you don't have a super heavy duty machine, you're going to want to use like lighter weight fabrics. And heavier needles all the way around, like a size 14 or 16 needle. And you don't want to forget to leave an opening.
So I'm gonna stop right here so I have an opening to turn this hat.
Perfect. So now we're going to turn the hat all right side out.
I didn't give myself a very large opening.
Then with the smaller opening to it means you have less of a hole to close up again at the end. This one's almost completely reversible. So then where that hole is, you're just gonna fold that all in and top stitch it. It's in the center back. So you can just fold that over and give it a top stitch and it'll be done. So the final step is to do a top stitch, and that's going to catch that hole in the back and then also give a final stitch to hold the hat together all the way around. Did the needle break? Faux Frau Lauren is modeling the finished trapper's hat. Right now the ear flaps are up, secured with buttons, and then she's going to take the flaps down and show you what it looks like. So now when it's a little colder outside, you can put the flaps down and keep your neck and your ears warm.
So I'm Faux Frau Lauren.
And I'm Frau Fiber.
We'd like to thank you for joining us for this trapper's hat tutorial, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Happy sewing.
We're so dorky.
We're so dorky. We're gonna be famous, Lauren.
Yes!